Hi guys, this is the first tutorial on Lumion. Today we're going to be discussing how to get a license for students. So you're going to go to lumion.com and click the student tab. And this is going to give you a 365-day free license for the program, and it'll give you the download for it as well. But before you can actually get it, you have to go through and verify that you are a student using PayPal to show what country you're in. So you can just log in through PayPal, follow the steps that they have, and it will direct you to their download page, and you should receive an email. I was able to receive the email within 10 minutes giving me verification, and it sends you straight to the download. And I also recommend that if you have enough computing power that you try this, which is called Live Sync, and it will actually let you update your Rhino model as you render, so that you can change a windowsill or you can change where a wall is located, and it will update in real time within Lumion. The only problem with this is it does use a little more computing power, so I won't be using it today, but I highly recommend this if you have enough computing power. Before we jump into Lumion, let's check out Rhino and see how your file needs to be set up for it to properly integrate in Lumion. Before we jump into Lumion, you're going to need to make sure that your Rhino file is set up properly. This means separating out all of your materials onto different layers. This is because Lumion identifies materiality information by the layers in your base file. That means that every different material that you want to have needs to be in its own layer. That means glass, concrete, metal, wood, everything needs to have its own layer. If you want to have two different types of metals, each of those types of metal are going to need its own layer. So you can see here in this base file that I have, I've assigned different layers for every different materiality. And you can see over here in the properties menu that every layer I've also assigned a basic material to. So this basic material being differentiated on each layer will then translate into Lumion as individual materialities. You just need to make sure that you have everything separated out and assigned a different material. From there, you should just save your Rhino file as a DXF file. There's a few different file types that Lumion will accept. I find that DXF files work the best, and the materiality usually translates the best through that. So go ahead and just save it as a DXF file, and then we'll go ahead and open it up in Lumion once I show you guys how Lumion works. Alright, so now that you have Lumion installed and up and working, your screen when you open it should look like this. And the first thing you're going to want to do is check your benchmark results. And this is going to tell you your graphics card and your computing power and your memory to tell you how well Lumion is going to be able to render and how quickly it's going to be able to render. You really should be meeting the recommended standards. I'm currently recording this on a laptop, so all of my computing power is much lower than recommended. If you're able to, try to get on a computer that lets you get up to this recommended mark, and Lumion will work much better for you. But besides that, we're going to go ahead and start a new project here. So you can create new, and you can pick any of these environments that you want. I'm going to go ahead and pick the tropical environment, and Lumion's going to take a moment here. Now that our Lumion scene is loaded, we're going to learn how to navigate around the scene. So the first thing you're going to want to know is to look around. You're going to want to hold down the right button on your mouse. So if you hold down the right button on your mouse and then move your mouse around, it will move your view without moving you around the scene. Now to actually move throughout your scene, the navigation is very similar to some video games. You're going to use quick keys on your keyboard, so W, A, S, D, Q, and E, and those are going to help you navigate throughout the scene. So if you hold down W, you're going to move forward. If you hold down S, you're going to move backwards. A to the left, D to the right, Q going up, and E going down. Those might take a little bit of time to get used to, but once you get used to them, you'll be able to move much quicker throughout the scene. So you can now combine moving and looking your view in different locations and actually moving throughout the scene. So while you're moving around your view, go ahead and press W, and you'll begin to move wherever you're looking throughout the scene. Now, if just moving around like this is a little bit slow for you, the best way to go a little bit faster is to hold down Shift while moving throughout your scene. So if you're using W to go forward and you add Shift, you'll go a little bit faster and you'll be able to fly around your scene much quicker. If that's still going a little slow for you, you can hold down Shift and spacebar while moving forward. So if you do W to move forward, Shift moves you a little faster, but if you add that spacebar, you can really begin to move a lot faster and you can reposition yourself in the scene much faster than you would otherwise. And you can do that with any of the movements throughout it. So if you want to move really fast to the right or really fast to the left, that's all possible just by adding down Shift and spacebar while moving. Those are pretty much all the navigation that you need to know. So next, we're going to go through and take a look at what you need to do to import your model into the scene. Lumion's interface is fairly user-friendly. So you can see down here in the lower corner, this is the main bar where you're going to see all of your information regarding your content library, materials, landscape, and weather. This is where you're going to go to delete, move, alter, and change anything that you add into your scene. This little bar over here allows you to change into rendering mode. So you have your file structure here where you can save your file, your 360 panorama, your build mode, your photo mode, and your movie mode. Movie, photo, and panorama mode are all going to be used to make renderings once you're done setting up your scene. But before you can render anything, you first need to import your building model. So what you're going to do is click on your Content Library tab, and you're going to press Import New Model. You're going to navigate to your folder where you have your DXF model saved. I'm going to import this one that I showed you earlier from Rhino. I'm going to go ahead and open that. It pops up to this screen just showing you the model name and what category. I'm going to click OK, and that's going to go ahead and load our model into the scene. Alright, our model just finished loading into the scene. So now you can click and place it in your model. You can see that it doesn't stop placing once you've placed it once. You can actually continue to place it. So the only way to get out of that is to press Escape. So once you press Escape, you'll no longer be placing that model. So what are you going to do when you now have 3 of the same models on accident? If you click on them, you can't select them yet. That's because you're still in the place mode. You can see that down here in the taskbar. If you want to select an object, you have to click here first, and then a little bubble will show up with the origin point of your selection, and that will allow you to then select your information or your model, which will then show up in the information panel up here, and it'll tell you what layer you're on, it'll let you lock it, select more objects, but what we really want to do is we want to delete 2 of these. So you have to come back down here to this information panel, and you can click this little delete icon. That will then allow you to select the things that you want to delete, and you can click on them, and they will remove themselves from your model space. So now we just have the one model. And let's say that this is a little bit too far over to the left of our clearing. So to move it, you're going to click the Select option, and then you're going to click Move Horizontal. This will allow you to move your model horizontally throughout your model space. Now that we have our object kind of in the center of the clearing, you can then take a look at down here the select icon and then move up. That will allow you to move your model up and down throughout the space. This is important because if we move our viewpoint over down here, if we take a look, we can see that Lumion, when it throws our model in, doesn't necessarily have it exactly in the correct place always. It's usually floating about a foot above the actual ground plane when it first imports. So what you're going to want to do is move it down a little bit so that it matches with your ground plane a little bit better. That will help you get more of an integrated feel with your model, and your model won't be floating over the ground plane anymore. The next thing we're going to want to do is take a look at the materiality of our model. So I'm going to go ahead and shift my view back around and get a little bit farther away from our model here so that we can take a look at the entire model and the entire model's materiality. So right now, all we can really do is select our model. This is because we're still in the content library selection mode for our imported models. Let's say that we want to switch over to this materiality panel. We then are allowed to select those layers that we originally set up in our Rhino model. So you can see the brick here, you can see the concrete, the glass, and that metal that we set up. All of those layers are from the Rhino model and they cannot be changed in Lumion. What you can do is if you say, oh, I messed up and I need to change these metal railings to be two different types of metal. What you can do is click back here at our content library so that you're back in the imported models section. And if you select that model, you can come up here to this button right here where it says re-import model. If you go ahead and make that change in Rhino and then save over top of your original file, you can click this button and it will re-import your model without making you readjust all of the size and location of your model. You can also click the Alt key and then click the re-import model, and it will pull up your file explorer where you can then navigate to a different file. It will continue to import that file from this base origin point. So whatever your origin point is in Rhino, it will continue to use that to re-upload your file here. With that in mind, let's go ahead and go back to the Materials tab here, and let's go ahead and select our first material. So I'm going to select this brick layer that I have from my Rhino file, and it's going to pull up your material library off to the side here. This is where you'll be able to select materials and alter your materials to be more customized. I'm going to go ahead and select outdoor, and I'm going to select a type of brick. So I'm going to select that brick, and I'm going to go ahead and double click on it. And it's now opened me up to the individual material edit tab. So this will allow you to then go in and change the map scale, the gloss, colorization, and a lot of other factors of your brick. So let's say I want the bricks to be really big. You can scale them up or scale them down to fit whatever need you have for this specific building or project. You can also change the location of them and the pitch for their rotation. So let's say I want it to be a really big brick on an angle. You can totally do that and have that done throughout this setting here. And that will change that individual material in your settings panel. So I'm going to go ahead and change these back because I like the way that it was before with a little bit bigger brick like that. I'm going to go ahead and leave it like that, and I'm going to select our next material, which is concrete here. I'm going to go back to the outdoor tab. You can see up here they have different materials listed. I'm going to click on concrete, and I'm just going to pick the first concrete. Now you can see everywhere that we had concrete modeled on that layer is going to show concrete in Lumion now. I'm just going to do the same thing for both the metal and the glass. So I'm going to select the metal, come back up here, and I'm going to do another outdoor material. And I'm going to click on this metal category right here. And let's say I want to do a little bit of a kind of coppery bronzed finish. You can change colorization here. So let's say I want a little bit of a red tint to that. So I want it to be almost like a bronzy kind of metal with a slight red tint to it, almost as if it's just beginning to rust underneath. You can change that colorization and it will affect your material. So you can see if I put the colorization all the way up, the material is going to be fully red. But I just want it to be a little bit of a tint of red. So we're going to call that good for the metal. And then I'm going to come up here and pick this wood material. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did before, where I came up to the outdoor. And I'm going to come here to the wood category. And I'm going to click over a page or two. And let's go with this one. That looks pretty nice. So the very last thing we need to do is this glass for the windows. And glass is a little bit trickier, and you'll see why. I'm going to come up to outdoor. I'm going to select the glass category, and I'm just going to go with this one. But as you can see here, I'm a bad architect, and I didn't model the interior of my building. So the glass is showing straight through to the brick right behind it, because I modeled my entire building as just a block and then cut the windows into it. A cheap way to get around this is to double click on that material, and then I'm going to go ahead and just increase the reflectivity until you can't see inside the building anymore. You can also change a bunch of these other settings to get it to the proper materiality that you want. But for now, I'm just going to leave it like this so that you can't see inside the building. So we're going to leave our materials like that for now. And to save everything from this, you're going to come over into this corner here and click Save Changes. And that will exit you out of your material editor mode. That will allow you to come back to your content library, and you'll once again be able to select the model and move it around in the space. Our model's starting to look pretty good, but it's still a building sitting in the middle of a clearing. So just like the rest of our scene here, we need to populate it with some buildings, people, maybe a car, or something like that. So you're still going to come down here to your content library, and you can see all of these options here that we haven't touched on yet. You're going to have the option to add trees, fine detail nature, people, lighting, transportation, outdoor objects, and indoor objects. So let's start with the nature category. When you click on that, it's going to let you select all of these nature objects that have already been placed in the original scene that we loaded. If you're in a blank scene and you want to add something, you have to come down here to your options menu and click the place option. This will add you into the place edit mode, and it will bring up your nature library. Now there's tons of different options that you can add into the scene. There's tons of different types of trees, bushes, flowers, plants, and all kinds of different things that you can choose from. I'm going to choose some flowers because I feel like that's pretty spring themed. I feel like that'll really brighten up this rendering here. So I'm just going to throw a few flowers in along the edge of this. And maybe we'll add some of these too. And I'm just going to continue placing them around here until we have a little bit more added in here. So let's go over to one of these other tabs too, and let's add some grass. Now this is just to show you how the placement tool works. This is the same thing that you'll do when you place people, cars, or other objects. We're actually not even going to use these flowers. The first thing we're going to do is take a look at this building being in a city. Now, the thing about this building is that in Rhino, I didn't model any of the streets at all. So one way around that in Lumion is by coming over here to the Landscape tab and clicking OpenStreetMap and turning it on. This will check your connection, and then it will load you into the online database where you can then pick a location for your building. It's a beta option though, so it doesn't always work. You're allowed to do it by selecting a GPS coordinate. So I'm going to come in here And I'm going to find Cincinnati. And I'll wait for it to load for a minute here. But this building is actually a building that we modeled last semester for Studio, and it's on this corner right here. So I'm going to go ahead and start the download to download that information from online. And that's going to go ahead and load in for a moment. There we go. Now that we have this loaded in, we can zoom out, take a look at fitting it into the building more, and figuring out exactly which one of these lots we need to move it into. So zooming all the way out, you can see that it imported all of our city buildings and our city map in a circular form around the point that we chose. So you can see our little building here, and you can see that all of that vegetation that was imported because we started a tropical model is still there. So what you're going to want to do is hold down Control, left click on the mouse, and drag it over all of that vegetation. That will allow you to select all of the vegetation at once, including the little flowers we added, and that will let you delete everything at once instead of having to individually select items. Now that I showed you how to put those little flowers in before, since this is actually going to be a city view, we're going to go ahead and zoom in here. So we're going to take a look at exactly where we want this building to be located. So this building is actually located right here, and this is the edge of it. So you can see our building is a little oversized for the lot. So I'm going to click on the imported models, and I'm going to click on my select button, and I'm going to make sure that I'm moving it horizontally, and I'm going to move it a little bit closer over to our site. Now what we need to do is rotate the model a little bit. So I'm going to rotate it just a little bit like that so that it fits better within our site boundary here. Now that we have it rotated within our site boundary, I'm going to go ahead and come down here to the scale tool, and I'm going to decrease the scale a little bit to fit better within this building block. I'm also going to move it horizontally over to the corner here, and I'm going to say that about there is good. Now if we come down here to the street view and get out of the building here, we can see that some of this grass is still showing up in our model. Sorry about that, my recording died. But basically to remove this grass in here, you're going to want to come over to the Landscape tab and go to Landscape Grass and just press the little power button here to turn the grass off. I usually do this for city scenes so you don't have any grass accidentally showing through pavement. The other thing that you might want to do next is to take a look at the height of these buildings, and that's back over here under the OpenStreetMap. And what you want to do is see over here where it says Buildings Minimal Height and Randomized Buildings Height. All of this data is actually from online GIS data, so you're going to want to increase the randomized height because all of these are just extruded to a standard building height. And then you want to increase the minimal building height to whatever the area or region that you're in. This region of Cincinnati usually has a 2 to 3 story building, so we're going to set it at that for now, and we're going to leave it that way. Now, the biggest problem with OpenStreetMap is that it doesn't include sidewalks. So if you really want to render a good city scene, I highly recommend modeling all of your city's elements, sidewalks, roads, and everything in Rhino. But I wanted to make sure that everyone knew that OpenStreetMap is an option through Lumion and that it will automatically add all of those buildings in for you. I'm going to go ahead and toggle off the visibility so you guys can see how we're back at this building plane from the tropical preset that we had, so you can still see some of those tropical trees that auto-populate in the background there. And I'm going to toggle that visibility back on. It's going to give you the little beta window, and then this will pop up and we'll begin to go in and I'll show you how to populate this with city elements rather than the flower elements I showed you earlier. Adding in other elements and people back into these renderings is exactly the same as I showed you earlier with the flowers. You're just going to go to the content library, and down here where you get your little edit menu, why don't we go ahead and do transport, because we can see those roads now. So now that we have the transport window open, we can go ahead and select cars or different methods of transportation to add into our scene. You can add anything from cars, SUVs, vans, buses, trucks, to boats, and anything else you can really think of. So why don't we go ahead and add an SUV into the scene? And I'm going to pick this one. And I'm just going to place that in our scene here. I'm going to click escape to get out of the place mode. And then I'm going to go ahead and zoom out and kind of get more of a top view here so that I can begin to place that car better into the scene. So I'm going to go ahead and do the select, move, and I'm going to move it over to this side of the road here and rotate it a little bit so that it's facing with the direction of our GIS roads. As you can see, I've gone through really quick and thrown in some more people and cars to populate this rendering here. And the next thing you're going to want to add in is some outdoor elements. So go ahead and open up that placement window. And once it pops up, you can see that you have park benches, street lights, all kinds of different things that you can add in. The thing I'm going to go through and add in is lighting. So I'm going to pick these nice lights here. And I'm just going to place them around the rendering. And I think one right here, and I will go ahead and select it and move it horizontally so that it's closer to this street corner here. You can also go through and rotate these just like all other objects. So let's say I want to rotate this one so that the tops are like that, so that all the streets show them parallel to the sidewalks. And then on corner conditions, let's go ahead and angle them a little bit. And I'm going to call that good. So there we go, we have our populated city rendering with some people, some cars, some street lamps. If we were looking to spend more time on this rendering, I would go through and model in all of those sidewalks in Rhino. But for this purpose of the tutorial, I'm just going to go ahead and use this as our final rendering. For this rendering, I'm going to go ahead and use a normal sunny day. But just so you guys know, this tab over here where it says weather will allow you to change the angle of the sun, the time of day, as well as what the sky looks like, the wind direction, wind speed. So you can go ahead and double click on your sky image here, and it will pull up a bunch of different images that you can choose from evening, morning, overcast, sunset, clear, night, and all kinds of different things to choose from. I'm going to go ahead and exit that though, and I'm going to leave the rendering the way that we have it right now. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my content library. If you guys want to add anything else into your rendering, you can go ahead and add it in now. But I'm going to go ahead and come over here, and I'm going to save all of my work. So I'm going to click on File. I'm going to click Save As. You should be saving earlier on in this process, but I'm just going to save it now as file 12. And I'm just going to click Save. So Lumion will go ahead and save my project, and then I'll begin rendering. All right, Lumion has saved it. So now down here, if you click the Build menu, we'll go back to where we were building our model. But if you want to render, let's start with a photo here. So when you go to render a photo, it'll open up to this window, And you'll see over on the side here, it lists all of the effects on your image. And at the bottom here, you have what's called the photo reel. You can see the preset that they have already set up is that there are these 4 images from that original scene that we began with. And that's the tropical scene that we started. If you start with an empty model, you won't have any of these to deal with. So why don't we go ahead and render this image that we have right here. So I'm going to click this button right here, which will save over this preset image. There we go. So now that that's saved in our photo roll, you can then begin to change your effects on it. So you can change the settings here from realistic, interior, night. They have all different kinds of settings. I'm going to stick with the realistic style. And let's say I want to increase the exposure. I'm going to click on the exposure. You can increase or decrease that as you see fit. I'm going to exit out of that. And you can change all of these other effects depending on what you want your rendering to look like. Now let's say you've changed all your effects to be perfect and you want to apply these effects to all of your subsequent renderings. What you're going to need to do is come up to these 3 dashes right here. If you click on them, it comes up with the options for File and Edit. You're going to click Edit and it will let you copy, paste, or clear the effects. You're going to go ahead and click Copy. So you've just copied all of these effects. And you can go over to other renderings that don't have any effects. You can once again click Menu, Edit, and then Paste. And you will have a copy of all your effects from your first renderings, so that the 2 renderings have the same style, the same lighting, and are rendered in a very similar manner. This helps renderings feel more uniform and sets everything for the different rendering modes in a very similar capacity. Now once you've decided on your final renderings, you're going to come over here and click the Render button. That will go ahead and bring you to a new window where you'll be able to either render your current shot or render a full photo set. And it will let you choose the quality of your output as well as any additional outputs such as reflections, shadows, and so on. I'm going to go ahead and do a photo set. And I don't want these last 2 because those were part of the preset. I just want to render these 2. And let's say I want to desktop render them. It'll let you pick your file location. You can name it whatever you want and click Save. That'll then go through and do rendering, and you can wait till it finishes rendering up. Once that's finished, we'll move on and I'll show you how to render a 360 panorama. Now that those photos are rendered, why don't we come down here to the 360 panorama button. Go ahead and click it and it will bring you to this window. This is where you can render 360 views. I don't want to render a 360 view of over here, but I do want to render something more in the middle of the street here. That way you can see the building and down all of the other streets as well. So let's say that right here is a good place. I'm going to go ahead and set my eye level a little bit higher. That's good. I'll say that that's okay for now. And I'm going to go ahead and click Render once I store that camera. So that camera is now stored, and I'm going to go ahead and click Render. It's a similar process to before. I'm going to render it as a medium file, label it whatever you want, and click Save. It then gives you your 360 file that you'll be able to view in any software that allows you to view it. The last thing that we have to review is rendering movies. Video rendering in Lumion is made through small clips created by single shot images. So down here you can see your photo reel, and these are each going to be smaller movie clips that are going to be made up of individual images that you can specify. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down here to this first clip, and we're going to click Edit Clip. That will bring you to this menu here, where you can then begin to pan around your site and choose where you want those images to start. So we can see that the park is over here. So why don't we start over here at this end of the park. To save this snapshot as your very first view, looking at the park, what you're going to want to do is come down here to the Insert Camera keyframe. But before we do that, why don't we make our focal length a little wider so that you get a larger view of the city. Then we're going to come down here, Insert Keyframe, and then let's go ahead and delete these old keyframes from the preset. The problem with deleting them first is that every time you click on a camera, it will navigate you to that view. So if you don't want to navigate to that view and have to navigate back, don't click on those views unless you actually have to. So I'm going to go ahead and delete those now and click on this frame to navigate back to our setting. And let's say I want the camera to travel back this way. So I'm going to navigate down this street, and I want a camera view to be directly down here. So I'm going to click Insert Camera Frame. I'm going to continue doing this down the entire street. Let's say I want another one. And I'll continue down until this street here. And you'll have to take periodic shots because the way that Lumion renders is that every single shot is seen as a period of time between each. So if you only had one screenshot at the beginning of the road and one screenshot at the end of the road, it would be very quick between these, and any subsequent images, if you took a lot around your object, would be much quicker. So it's going to actually alter the amount of time spent in each location. So why don't we go ahead and zoom in even farther here. So now you can see that we've navigated ourselves a little bit too high and we're way above street level. Rather than having to go back through and edit the height and reshoot all of our images, what you can do in Lumion is come down here to the Edit Eye Level button. It's currently at 6.84 meters. Why don't we set all of these back to 1.5 meters? The thing is, you can't click on this frame again, or it will reset you to that height. The way that you have to do it is do the 1.5, and then you can click Update Camera Keyframe. You'll have to do this for every keyframe if you want them to be the same height. So I've gone through and readjusted all of these to 1.5. Now that our height is correct and we're more at a human perspective for viewing, the other thing that you might want to do is alter where your camera is looking. Standard, it's kind of straight ahead at eye level, but let's say you want to tilt it up a little bit. So you're going to go ahead and use your normal camera tilt, so right click on your right mouse button and angle your view up, and then you can just resave or update the camera keyframe. So right here in the corner, you can see it says 48.71 seconds. That's going to be the time of the movie clip created. So if you want to make it shorter, you can go ahead and change it down to a different period of time, and that will keep all of the images that you selected previously, but just speed through the frames a lot faster. So with a little bit of movie magic, we can now watch this. Shortening it down to 15 seconds here. If we press play, we can watch it zoom around the corner here, head down this street. You get a nice view of all these buildings going by. And eventually you get to the site here. But let's say that this might be a little bit too much time on the road here. You can either remove one of these beginning frames. So if we click on this and double click to delete, and if you watch it again, you can see it goes much faster through here. But let's say we wanted to focus more time on the building. So I'm just going to exit that clip and go over to this clip that I previously created. And if we watch it, you can see that it zooms along the street much faster. And then once we eventually reach the site down here, you can see it'll pause for a moment here and then look back up at that building. And that's done fairly easily just by adding a secondary clip right next to it. So you'll see there's one flat clip here that looks straight on, and then one clip a little bit more zoomed in that you end on with kind of that money shot. Now, because this rendering does show a park and there's supposed to be greenery here, why don't we exit out of our movie mode here? These clips will all be saved, and let's go back to the build mode. So we're back here at this park here. I'm going to go ahead and go up in our model here and get back a little bit so that we can take a look at this and add in some nature. So I'm going to click the nature button here. And this is just like all of our other editing and the flower editing that I showed you earlier. And all you're going to do is kind of pick whatever trees that you'd like to add in. I'm going to click over a few rows here and see if we can add in some of these really nice big cherry oaks. So I'll click a few in here. And the other thing that you can do is closer to the ends of these, there are tons of different options, but if you go specifically to clusters of trees, you can get larger groups of trees and groups of smaller foliage, but I'm going to go for probably one of these down here. I'm going to go with the pine tree cluster, and that'll help me populate this a lot faster with some foliage in these tree areas. I know that this particular park doesn't actually have this much foliage, but I'm just going to throw these in here for the sake of this rendering tutorial so that you guys can see this in action a little bit better. So now I'm going to come back to this movie mode, and if we come to this rendering here, you'll see it will now show all of these trees. And if we click play, we can see that it goes past these trees. It'll go through a few of them if you place them closer to the road. And then it'll continue on its rendering path till we reach the end here, where we have that slow down and the look up at the building. That's kind of the basics of rendering in Lumion. You can do your photos, your 360 panoramas, and your movies. That pretty much covers all the basics of Lumion. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope it helped you learn the basics of Lumion better.